Hi, welcome to Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. This is part 6 of a 32 Ford Roadster body build. For those of you watching this for the first time, there's 5 other episodes prior to this where we've built the subframe, we put the cowl together, we put the doors together, the 1 quarter panel, the 2nd quarter panel. In this video here, what I'm doing is covering, basically reinforcing the back half of the body. I like to put this structure in place on the Roadsters. I've done it on 4 other Roadsters before. What it does, it actually ties the Roadster body into like a firm structure. It won't move side to side, keeps the alignment on the doors. To do it, you got to make sure that the measurement, like from here, the B-pillar up to this point, I've got 52.5 from there, and I've got the same the other way. So from a triangulated point of view, I'm good. The other measurement is from here to the bottom of this tray. It's 24 3/4 on both sides. So not only am I good like on an angle point of view, but I'm also good up and down. So what I've done since the last video was put this tray in place. It's spot welded in place, and then built this structure here that basically ties everything in. What I'm going to be doing next is actually installing these B-pillar reinforcing pieces. Now, you got to beat the living crap out of these basically to fit them in. And the first time I did it, I thought it was really strange until I actually saw some Brookfield bodies right from Brookfield and then pictures of their own. I'm not sure why, but basically it's got to be beat until it fits in here. It's going to get welded to the B-pillar and welded to the subframe. So the body is at that stage where I install these. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to work my way back after that's done. And on the previous video, I also built some of these sub-rail extensions. I have these tacked in place now. There's a whole bunch of different pieces of sheet metal that goes in here. There's a support piece, and then there's the extension for the floor. All of that basically leads up to installing this back panel. Now, while I have this back panel, Brookfield makes a really nice one. I have this one that was given to me for doing the 5 windows. I'm not sure if that's even 20 gauge metal. I'm thinking it's 22 gauge. Will it fit? Yes. I'm not happy with it. So while I have this Brookfield as a pattern, what I'm going to try and do is actually make some of these for the 2 5 windows over here because I need them while I have a really good pattern. Now the Roadster panel is not the same as a 5 window. The width is the same, the reveal is the same, but the overall length is actually not the same. It's actually the 5 windows a little bit longer. The other piece that has to be made, and while I've got a good copy, is the back of the floor extension, which fits in here. Again, I'm not sure. I think it's a little shorter on the 5 windows, but while I have a pattern in my hand, I may attempt to make that either on this video or a subsequent video. So follow along in this video, and I'm going to move along with the Roadster build. More than likely, it's going to be this episode and another one after it before it's finished. There's a few more things to tie in, and like I said, there's about 10 little pieces that I've got to put together here and line up in the back so that I make sure that the trunk lid will go up and down. So we'll put the trunk lid in, not install it, but hold it in place to make sure that when I tie everything in across the bottom, that trunk lid comes up and down squarely and I've got a good gap. So follow along. Okay, moving along here, I actually welded in the B-pillar supports like I said. And just as I described, you pretty much have to beat these in to get them in place. As I've said, I've actually looked at Brookfield bodies straight from the factory, and they do exactly the same thing. Not sure why, but that's the process to put those in. Our Roadster is done this way. This one is. So right now, the B-pillars are completely welded in. Everything up to this point is all squared up, doors open and shut. Still have to go back and put the dash in, but I'll cover that later. I've carried on down to the back here, and I'm just going to show one of the pieces that we put in place because as I go along, it's going to get covered up. So this support piece here for the drip rail is welded in place here. Sometimes they'll put a screw in here, and then also it's tack welded here along to it. So both of these supports are in place now. And as I said in the beginning, I wanted to make extra rear pans. We have the Brookfield one here. It's a good example. On that one, there's a piece that goes across the back. So that's what it looks like. So that I put in here, and I hammered basically the edge over here because that's the way it's installed. So this one is all shaped and ready to more or less go in. But before I put it in, I wanted to show you how to make one of these. It helps, obviously, having a piece here to make a pattern off of. So I laid out this piece on a piece of sheet metal. I allowed for the flanges. There's the top, there's the bottom, and here's the sides. The other thing with this, there's a curvature to it. So the curvature is actually in the flanges themselves, which when I bend them, I'll have to shrink them. And you can see along the bottom here, there's a curve to it. But if you look this way, it's a perfectly straight bend. So how I'm going to get that is once I have a shape to the panel, I'll bend this over and then I'll go along with the shrinker and shrink this to get this curve, and I'll do the same thing along the sides. Just to be sure that I could basically make this shape and bend it over, last night I took a piece of scrap and I just bead rolled the edge here. And then I took it to the brake, I bent the edge over, and then I shrunk it. So I basically can reproduce that shape. Knew I could, but anyways. So this piece, I laid it out, and because there's actually a curve this way and a curve this way, I needed to get this shape in here. So over here on the English wheel, I just finished doing this, but I'll show you what I did. Now there's a number of different wheels, all different shapes. So there's 7 of them there with different curves. So I took one of these wheels off and I flipped it on the back of the panel so that I could get the right shape. I didn't want too much of a shape to it. And then basically, as you saw me in another video, worked it back and forth and back and forth. I did one pass, and then I took it over on the panel, and then I did a second pass until I got the right shape. So I'm not going to do that because you've seen me do it before. That's how you choose your wheel to go into it based upon the shape that you want to get on the panel. So back here, I'm going to go back again. Oh, I'm going to trip myself up. I'm going to knock stuff out. So if we come back over here, this shape, you can see along the lines there, it's actually got a little bit of a bow to it with two rounds on the English wheel. If I lay that over the panel, it pretty much sits there, and it's got the right shape this way and this way. So at this stage, I'm ready to snip my corners out and start folding edges out. Actually, I'm going to snip the corners out, and then I'm going to bead roll this line. So follow along, I'll bead roll this line, flip the panels over, and then do it a second time. I laid out the lines for the where I've got to run the beads. Hopefully you can see this. I'm not sure if the lighting's very good or not, but here's where I'm going to fold this edge. Here's the bottom edge, and then you can see the reveal where I've got to roll the bead. The bead actually stops right at the line, so I'm probably going to do this in about 2 passes. That's what it took last time. You can also see the crown on it, like as it sits on the table there, which is what we were trying to accomplish with the English wheel. So I'm just going to roll this and then we'll fold the edges after that. There's the bead rolled in 2 passes. Don't want to go too much more because if you take another pass, you can actually cut the metal. I'm still using the same dies I used in all my other videos. Basically, it's a step die. The top edge is the way it came stock, basically when I bought it, just sharp edge. And then the bottom one I took and we ground the radius on the bottom. That way, when I go to form body lines like what I have here on the panel, is I'm going to have one sharp edge, which is the bottom one, and then the top one, it's softened. I'm sure we could buy some special dies for it, but we make what we have work. So I'm going to carry on. I'm going to bend the flanges on these, and hopefully we'll have a finished panel here shortly. Hi, so I carried on with the panel, bent all the flanges, both on the sides and across the bottom. This is the panel that we just finished showing you bead rolling. The flanges were bent, and I don't know if the camera lady can, without me taking it off, if she can look in around. You can see here along this flange the shrink marks. So I've stretched, or I've shrunk this flange so that I've got the right shape across the back of the body. And then I did the same thing on the sides. You can see where it's clamped in place. I just assembled this lower panel onto this body just to show that, you know, it's basically, here's the Brookfill. It's really close, and with a tiny little bit of body work onto it, you'll never know that I made it. So it's pretty simple to do. I carried on and I began working on the 2 5-window panels. So I've got 2 panels wheeled and I've bead rolled it in, and I'm over there right now getting ready to bend the flanges on these. So I'm going to carry on making these 2 5-window lower panels, and then what I'm going to do is fit the Brookfill one onto the Brookfill body and carry on with the assembly on the back of the 32 Roadster. I carried on working and making the 3 back panels. So there's 2 back panels now for each one of the 5 windows. And I wound up making a spare one for a Roadster, which I don't need, but I'll stick on the shelf. But they turned out well. Everything's all radiused right, got the right bow. The Roadster one I made was the one that you just saw on the Roadster here, so it fit well. I've trialed these on over in the 5 windows, so they're made properly. What I've done now is I've taken the Brookfill piece and actually installed it. It's got 1/4 inch nuts and bolts here. There's 3 of them. They're bolted in place. I've tack welded down here this support to the floor, and then the extensions, the subrail extensions, are now welded to the inside and then welded down up against the subrail itself. The floor is not in place yet. I just wanted to show everybody the next step and where we're at, and just kind of show as each piece goes in, because you wind up covering the pieces up. If I show you the finished product, the next step, there's a floor extension that goes in place. Now before I put this in, I'm going to make a couple of these for the 5 windows, using these as a pattern. The 5 windows is just a little bit shorter, but it's the same piece. So I'm just going to take a few minutes here. I'll make a couple of these. I'm going to carry on after that and install this and show you how it goes in. So I did decide to make the two rear floor extensions that go to the rear pan. It was relatively straightforward. I didn't videotape it, but essentially, you know, I started by doing this first step, just using these two offset dies like I normally do for a lot of general purpose stuff. Once I did this on either end, then I switched. I did the half inch bead, pretty heavy bead down the center, and put the beads up the side here to the edge. Just move this out of the way, and then I finished it with these tipping dies here. So I've used the tipping dies on other videos before, but you essentially start with it flat, roll it here, and you basically apply pressure until you've got it rolled over. The only thing is I had to go past 90 degrees, so I tipped it as far as I could. Then basically just use some sheet metal vice grips and work my way around and bent it. There's a lot of distortion as a result of the beads. I could have pre-stretched it, but what I did instead, in order to get a straight line here, I just, you can see all the shrink marks here. I put it across the shrinker until I had a straight line. And then even across the sides here, where we've got this heavy bead, it tended to warp or buckle this, so simply just put it in the shrinker and shrunk it down because this area was shrunk as well. So that's the two floor extensions that will go on the 5-window. They, like I said, these are a little shorter than what the Roadster ones are. So what I did, I moved the bead closer to the edge than what it is on the Roadster. That way I've got room to trim this off to fit it on the 5-window. So there's one more piece that will eventually go there for the 5-window. Just taking advantage of the fact that we have parts on the Roadster here that I can copy. Over on the Roadster, I continued to put everything in place. I put the rear pan in and I spot welded it in place. I put the support here for the back. It just welds to the rear pan. The rear pan welds underneath of the floor pan. And that's basically where we're going to end this video because I'm running out of time to post it for Thursday night. There'll be one final video in which I will do the trunk lid and the installation. There's a drip tray here. There's a couple other things I'll wrap up on that video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please send us a message. Please also hit the subscribe button. We're getting close to that magical 1,000 subscribers, which we'd never thought we'd ever get close to. But if you can click it, it'd be much appreciated. Everybody take care and have a good one.